A very good afternoon to all of you. I think it's a wonderful afternoon considering that the temperature is rising, and hopefully it could be one of the probable reasons which can get us out of the COVID-19. We welcome all of you, all the dear participants and the esteemed speakers today on this webinar on staying ahead of the corona curve, rebooting the medical devices sector. Medical devices sector is a very, very important and integral part of the entire healthcare delivery system. Therefore, other than the vaccinations and medicines, it's the appliances and especially the ventilators in this case, which are playing a critical role to keep people alive and kicking out of this situation. We are joined by a very esteemed panel today, and I'd like to give a quick round of introduction. I'd like to start with the Vice President of PhD Chamber, Mr. Multani. He's also the Chairman and Managing Director of Multani Pharmaceuticals. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us today. I'd like to also introduce Mr. Sanjay Jha. Mr. Sanjay Jha is the co-founder of Coalmed, which is a leading platform for medical device distribution in India. Welcome, Mr. Jha. We also have with us Mr. Ritesh Dogra, and he's been a member of the founding team of the Medium Healthcare Consulting. Welcome, Mr. Dogra. We also have amongst us Mr. Sunil Khurana. Mr. Khurana is the CEO and Managing Director of BPL Medical Technologies Private Limited and Penlong Limited. And he's a veteran business leader for over 3 decades of expertise in the medical devices sector. And this is some experience which we're going to try and leverage on today. We also have Dr. Subramanian, who is the chairman of the Health Committee of PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also the medical director of the Apollo Hospitals. Thank you very much, Dr. Subramaniam. As I said, it's very inspiring to see you all prepared, in that attire. We are also joined by Mr. Ganesh Sabar, who is the CEO of Sejanand Medical Technologies, again, a very leading company in medical products, medical devices products. And I must add that they were the first ones in the country to bring about cost-effective stents, which are used for the cardiologist. And they're one of the leading manufacturers of stents in the country, and are also now exporting globally. So there we have an excellent panel ready to kickstart the discussions, and let us see how we can take the expert advices and the voices here to help the medical devices industry grow to a global level. And could we possibly be the medical devices destination for the world after being the pharmacy to the world? With this, I will request our Vice President of PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Multani, to kindly welcome the speakers and the panelists formally. Mr. Multani.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vivek Sehgal. Can you hear me clearly? I'll also request all the participants to kindly mute their mute themselves so that one can hear clearly. You can hear me, Vivek?
We can hear you, sir. Please go ahead.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you again, Vivek. Good morning. Good morning to everyone. On behalf of PhD Chamber and Voice of Healthcare, I would like to welcome our panelists of the session. We have with us Dr. N. Subramaniam, Chairman, Health Committee, PhD Chambers, and Director, Medical Services, Indraprastha Apollo Hospitals. Mr. Sunil Khurana, CEO and MD, BPL Medical Technology, Mr. Ganesh Sabath, CEO, Sahajanand Medical Technology Private Limited, Mr. Ritesh Dogra, Managing Partner, BDM Consulting, Mr. Sanjay Jha, Collateral Medical Device Portal, and today's session moderator, Mr. Vivek Sehgal, Principal Director, PhD Chambers. I would also like to welcome our co-host of the webinar, Dr. Naveen Nischal, Chairman, Voice of Healthcare, and Ms. Pinky Chahar, Deputy Director, Voice of Healthcare. Ladies and gentlemen, PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry has been working as a catalyst for the promotion of Indian industry, trade, and entrepreneurship for the past 115 years. It is a forward-looking, proactive, and dynamic pan-India apex organization. As a partner in progress with special focus on MSMEs works at the grassroots levels, with strong national and international linkages for propelling progress, harmony, and integrated development of the economy. The middle industry in India consists of large multinationals with extensive service networks as well as small and medium enterprises. The current size of the medical devices industry in India is estimated to be $11 billion. Diagnostic imaging, consumables, and other medical devices form 86% of the total export trade for Indian medical devices industry in financial year 16-17. The US is the largest exporter, accounting for 15% of the export trade. Singapore, Germany, and China are the other leading exporters, accounting for 7%, 6.7%, and 6.4% respectively. The European Union constitutes 27.1% of the total export trade. Furthermore, the US, China, Germany, Japan, and Singapore constitute the 5 largest exporters of high-tech technology to India. India's device industry is poised for significant growth in the next 5 years. The market size is expected to reach $50 billion by 2025 by growing at 28% per annum. Orthopedic, prosthetics, and patient aid segments to be the 2 fastest growing verticals by 2020 and are projected to grow at a CAGR of 9.6% and 8.8% respectively. Diagnostic imaging, dental products, and consumables are expected to grow at a CAGR of 7.1%, 7.4%, and 7.1% respectively during the period 20 onwards. 100% FDI is allowed under the automatic route for medical device industry. There are 750 to 800 domestic medical devices manufacturers in India, with an average investment of $2.3 to 2.7 million, and average turnover of $6.2 to 6.9 million. Around 65% of the manufacturers are mostly domestic players operating in the consumable segment and catering to local consumption with limited exports. The impact of the coronavirus pandemic and the lockdown it triggered is clearly visible in financial markets. But there is still no clarity on the deeper impact sectors. The healthcare sector is at the epicenter of this unprecedented global pandemic challenge, and the private sector has risen to the occasion by offering to the government all the support it needs, be it testing support, preparing isolation beds for the treatment of COVID-19 positive patients, or deploying equipment and staff in identified nodal hospitals. The medical devices industry has also taken a hit. The country imports consumables, disposables, and capital equipment, including orthopedic implants, gloves, syringes, bandages, computed tomography, and magnetic resonance imaging devices from China. Due to the current crisis in China, the medical device manufacturers across India are finding it difficult to source important raw materials and electronic components from Chinese factories. Even though some of the factories in China have restored operation, shortage of some critical electronic parts and raw materials still exists, which is adversely affecting the margins and profitability of Indian companies importing medical devices and small components to manufacture finished products. This can also put upward pressure on prices of medical devices in the short term. As our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi has mentioned in his speech, that as a nation today, we stand at a very crucial juncture. Such a big disaster is a signal for India, which has brought a message and an opportunity. Honorable Prime Minister also shared his perspective with an example that when the coronavirus started, there was not a single PPE kit made in India. The N95 masks were produced in small quantity in India, and today we are in a situation to produce 2 lakh PPE and 2 lakh N95 masks daily. We were able to do this because India turned this crisis into an opportunity. Of India turning crisis into opportunity, equally effective for reliant India. PhD chamber are already working for the growth of IT, which would stand totally the government in all initiatives. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of PhD chamber, I once again welcome you all and look forward to your active and valuable participation in this important session. Thank you very much and God bless everyone. Vivekji, back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Multani, for those very important and...
Vivekji, back to you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and I've taken over. Thank you very much.
Unmute yourself, please. Unmute yourself. Vivekji, unmute.
I'm unmuted. Can others hear me, please? So others can hear me. I'll just carry on. So thank you very much for...
Vivekji, you cannot be heard. Please unmute yourself.
I have unmuted myself. Others can hear me. I think there could be a possible problem. Yeah, so probably there's a problem with your connection. So I think the medical devices industry definitely deserves a big applaud, for rising to the occasion of different medical devices which were required for the COVID-19 situation. And I think there's much more that what we can do as a country, as a medical device industry, which will be basically the agenda for this particular webinar. I am obliged to say that rebooting the medical device strategy at the rate COVID-19 has been sponsored by Apollo Hospitals. And we are very, very thankful to the Apollo Hospitals for helping us. And so I would like to start the discussions by quickly getting quick reactions for 2 to 3 minutes, the opening remarks of each of the speakers. May I request Mr. Sunil Khurana to kindly give his opening remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Vivek, and thanks for inviting. I have completed about 36, 37 years in this industry, medical devices. And when I started in 83, it was a very small business. And now, just now we heard Mr. Pradeep telling that it's about $10 billion industry. It's very heartening. Another thing which he said is that, in probably 5 years from now, we'll become a 50 billion. That's again a very, very motivating fact. Now, I'm working currently with BPL, and BPL is about a 50 years old company and primarily focused in the cardiology in the beginning. 2013, Goldman Sachs invested in this company, and that's where the new company avatar has started, you can say. We are in 6 segments. We are in cardiology, where ECG, Holter, and all those products. Critical care, which is patient monitors, syringe pumps, anesthesia machine, ventilator, oxygen generators. We have built a radiology platform where ultrasounds and X-rays we have. Ultrasounds we import from a partner, and X-rays complete range, including DR, we manufacture here. Then we have big range, maternal infant care, fetal Dopplers, colposcopes, incubators, warmers, etc. And home care is an area which we have just launched 2 years back, where BP instruments, thermometers, nebulizer, CPAP, BiPAP, etc. we have started. And The last is that we have our own accessories business, which are needed for the all products as well as consumable. And what significant thing we have done in 2015 was acquiring a UK-based company by name Penlon, and they are the major in anesthesia. I'm very pleased to tell here to everyone that UK government awarded us, and we worked actually last 4 or 5 weeks and built a ventilator, very high quality ventilator, and we have got a 15,000 unit award from there. And in the consortium, we are making those products there. Now, I'll just give you a little bit background that look at what we are and where we probably can go. In my view, on an Atmanirbhar is what we are talking, make in India is the most important. Very, very important that more and more Indian products are being made. If you look at the total global market, it's about 600 billion. And we are talking 10 billion today. Whereas if you look at the population, we are about 16 to 17%. Whereas that is just 1.5% of the total value. So if all the parities are controlled or corrected, you can think that what opportunities we have. We can today be $100 billion medical device companies in India, which is truly not there today because of the many other reasons, but we definitely have that potential. If it by 2025, as Mr. Pradeep said, we become 5 times more, and today if I take 2 billion, which is 20% of the 10 billion today as a local, because 80% still imported products, we can become $15 billion if we reach to a 30% localization. I'm not even talking of beyond that. In 5 years' time, we go from 20 to 30%, we will become a 15 billion. So look at the size. Another area what we have is our beds are very small. I mean, today we have only 1.5, 1.4 beds per 1,000. And that's also growing because Government of India had given a mandate that every year there is an investment happening toward that side. And that will also go to 2.5 beds. So that's another area which is going to change it very, very differently. How I see enablers. What are the enablers which are going to change the way we are moving here? Is that there is a correction done by Government of India in the last couple of years on the inverted tax structure. Duty has been controlled. Health cess has come now. For imported products, health cells is a painful, but that's also enabler because you get a pressure to build more and more product that becomes motivation to do a lot of startups. Yesterday, finance minister has given that infectious wards has to be set up in each district headquarters. Now that's again a big opportunity which is going to kick in big time. As Mr. Pradeep said, 100% FDI is anyways there. But what I feel, and I want to also convey here, and we have Ganesh here who can probably later complement his thoughts, that we need to make products not only for India. We need to product quality product which can be taken outside India, and that's the way this market can grow big time. There, another area which has to be clearly understood is that what government can do here. Government should identify some companies who are planning to move out of China, because we all understand today there's a lot of pressure which is becoming on China and a lot of negativity happening there. So government can play a very vital role. They can work very closely with South Korea, Japan, US, Germany, Israel, these countries where we can probably get those, some companies to set up here shops in partnership or directly. So that's another way to look at India, how it grows. Another area which is still lagging today is the ecosystem. I mean, our ecosystem is not very good. And we know that the way government did it for auto sector or even pharma. Auto is a great example where with the right policies, today you have a wonderful ecosystem established. And the way things are happening today for the medical devices, I am very confident that in probably next couple of years, we'll see a great ecosystem. Today, if you see first attempt is done by AMTZ, Dr. Jitendra Sharma, who's the CEO there. They're setting up a lot of things there. In fact, the regulatory and all the support systems they are building, and that kind of system is required across. So that's another area which needs to be done. One area where government can play a big role to make us more dependent is to give some export incentives. Export incentive is what China has done and other countries have done. That has been a very, very good. R&D credit could be another area which can probably kickstart big time. Platform has to be formed like academia. If you look at the global companies, they work very closely with academia, healthcare delivery people, and then healthcare devices and regulatory people all work together. We can make it really big. And we need to create a strong framework for clinical trials. That's again very important. If you look at the small country, which is probably 2% of your population, South Korea, the way they have built the framework is amazing. And coming back on the COVID journey, I just want to say that, in the month of January when it started, we first time heard COVID. I mean, it was just a very not heard. Nobody was prepared for that. In fact, I'm very happy that my son's wedding was in the first week of Feb. And if it was a month later, we would have really faced a lot of issues, Now, Chinese New Year was there in the first, second week of Feb. And that is the time we started realizing that some partners who are with us there as a contract manufacturer, they started saying that now they are shut and they can't really help there. March, we realized that things are becoming even difficult because our year-end pressure was there and things were not moving fast. Even what materials we made at factory, we're not even getting transporters to take the material out and things like that. So basically, after 15th March, I can say there was a lot of terrified stories of business happened, lockdown happened. It was a lot of a challenge. But from April onwards, I think we have learned it. We have learned that how to finally manage it, though there is a lot of disruption on the local and global supply chain, but we have learned how to do business. And from there onwards, we have built a lot of frameworks internally, identified some right products there where we need to go and how we finally build. Even work from home was a very new word for us. I mean, our business is not like IT where you just can sit behind a computer and do the job. I mean, our guys, service guys, I want to thank here to the entire service team of not only our company, all the industry people, the thousands of guys were working daily and fixing machines, installing machines, and they were doing a great job in the market. So look at the factories. Factory cannot work on sitting from home. So, it's a different industry. We need to really understand that what can work from home and how we can do. So we have found a middle path. We're very lucky that Kerala is where our factory is there. And Kerala was the first to come out of the challenges. And we have seen now close to 90% guys back in the factory. So that's how it started. And today we are back in offices, all the locations. Our team is connecting customers, understanding and accessing the things. So this is the journey so far we have had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khurana. I think very well covered, especially when you're talking about how we can reach about $15 billion quickly, number of beds, quality products for overseas exports. I see a lot of points. The academia, medical devices, and the hospital, that is the healthcare delivery industry working together. Export incentives, not to forget AMTZ. Yes, I must share at this point of time that even PhD chamber, represented by myself, we have been on the board of directors of AMTZ from day one, and we have seen that zone actually coming up from scratch into the sprawling and one of the most equipped, I think, any medical devices park, not only in India, but across Asia.
Yeah, I've been across the country, seen many medtech park, and this one is really very impressive. I think this is the standards are very high, and it's a very visionary thought of some people who have built it. And if we have more and more of those natures, at least 4 should be there in the country of this size, then can really help a lot.
Yes, as a part of the board, we are trying to push it across and see in case we can have it in different parts of the country as well. Yeah. So with that, I think a thought of yours that there is a need for collaboration between the healthcare delivery and the medical devices companies. I'd like to bring on board Dr. Subramanian for his opening remarks as to his journey across COVID-19 and how does he see these collaborations going forward. Dr. Subramanian.
Thank you, Mr. Sehgal. Let me first begin by thanking you for the opportunity. And I think both our Vice President, Pradeep Multani, and Mr. Khurana have really given us a great background from which it's probably easier for me to take on. When I started my career in medicine about 46 years ago, and when I see the sea change in the practices that have happened in medicine today, a lot of that is due to the development of medical technology. Medical technology, devices, consumables, diagnostics. So we realize that a lot of what you and I see today as advanced medicine has come from developments in technology rather than surgical skills or medical skills alone. We know that, today, the entire US, the entire Europe, along with Brazil and Argentina put together, have the same population, which is marginally less than what India's population is. So I think when you look at the COVID management by this country at this point in time, I think we must compliment the government on the tremendous role they have played in achieving this. Going on the background, if you see, we have a much longer lifespan today than we were 30 years ago. So more people are living longer. We also know there's a constant increase in both non-communicable and communicable diseases that's happening. We know that by 2025, 75% of all illnesses would be due to non-communicable diseases. We are almost the diabetes capital of the world today, with over 60 million who are diabetics today. By 2025, that number is expected to be around 90 million. Now, on that background, if you see what has happened in the growth of the healthcare itself, if you see, for instance, we have over the last 20 to 30 years built world-class hospitals. We have tremendous expertise and advanced equipment, and we have become one of the medical value travel destinations. It's because we are able to offer quality healthcare of the best levels at much lower costs than you could even visualize anywhere in the past. The government, on its part, has played a good role in expanding the primary and secondary health units, along with increasing the awareness. And I think with the coming in of the Swachh Bharat, I think it will again be a great contribution to preventing a lot of illnesses. But what is also true is our part of the world has been that the growth of tertiary care to a great extent has been seen in the private sector. But notwithstanding the growth in the government and the private sector, we are still very low on hospital bed strength, but it is increasing. From where we were on 0.8 million to 1.6, we expect that by 2025, we'll have about 2.9 million beds that would be available. All this will underscore the need for us to focus more on the medical devices. Both in pharmaceutical and medical devices, I think our industry has shown a tremendous amount of innovation, a lot of resilience, etc. But notwithstanding that, even a country like Mexico, their medical devices factor is over 17 billion, and we are aiming to get at 10 billion. So I think there is a tremendous scope for us to do a lot more on this. Coming from the medical perspective, I think a lot of the control of diseases will rely on screening and awareness to begin with, early diagnosis, adequate treatment, and good follow-up. And all that will require good quality equipment, right from diagnostic equipment, be it the laboratory-based, be it imaging, like like Multani said about the role of MRIs and CTs, which we continue to import. A lot of the diagnostic kits for the COVID and even PPE to begin with, we were dependent on importing from other countries. And the COVID situation made it difficult to have an access to either the raw material or the finished product, and also the ability to transport those across to be made available. So I think in terms of all the segments, be it consumables, be it implants, be it diagnostics, be it instruments, be it patient devices, the prosthetics, the Internet of Things, the wearable devices, all these will make the quality of life much, much better, prevent a lot of illnesses. They might help us to focus on a smaller number of diseases which will need to be treated. So I think the scope that is available in terms of what is required for future, in terms of the potential for how much demand there is going to be both within the country and beyond for medical devices, is going to be growing only exponentially. And especially with artificial intelligence coming in, with the role of telehealth and telemedicine, and various diagnostics coming in. For instance, the Apollo group of 72 hospitals recently participated in various programs, and the joint parameters have brought over 3 million who have benefited from various mechanisms, including an artificial intelligence-based risk stratification for COVID. So I think the scope is, difficult to even visualize at this point in time. But I'm sure, I think our colleagues in the medical device industry will continue to do some excellent work, making my job as a healthcare provider much easier. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Subramanian. I think key takeaways, we're looking at 90 million diabetics, hoping to have about 2.9 million beds. Resilience, which has been shown by the medical devices industry. So congratulations, Mr. Khurana, Mr. Sabat. But at the same time, I think 17 billion is the Mexico figure. So we are way behind and a lot to catch up with the developing or similar developing economies. And with a lot of scope, there, which Dr. Subramanian has actually talked about for the medical devices industry. It's not only good news, but also time for me to ask Mr. Ganesh Sabat to come on board and let us hear from him as to what does he feel about the growing opportunities. You've done a great job in the devices sector, especially on stents, and you have a lot of US FDA approvals I know of, but I think I'd like to hear from you about this and the corona curve. Mr. Sabat.
Thank you, Vivekji. Thanks a lot. Very good afternoon to all my friends on the panel. Some of them are highly reputed, and congratulations, ESD, to have such a great panel and discuss about something which is highly relevant. But let me start with first thanking Dr. N. Subramanian. Sir, thanks a lot. Today we are proud of people like you, the healthcare community. I think we all are thankful to be alive at this stage and the number of people that you have saved. I think India, the recovery rate is one of the best in the world. And no wonder the credit should go to our healthcare community. We are thankful to you, sir. Thankful for contributing right now to the humanity, to the world at large. And we'll always remain obliged for the contribution that you have done. And there are a lot of great panelists like Sunilji who are doing a tremendous job. SMT, even during COVID-19, we gave away around 150,000 face shield cover. We gave away free to all the healthcare community. We created a ventilator. We just got approval. Also, we are creating paper masks. So we are doing a small contribution. But at the same time, I think the government has done a tremendous job. Let us not forget, it's not an easy task. The COVID-19, it's not an easy task. When people are dying left, right, and center, taking decision at that stage, and there is panic all across. People are traveling, the migrant workers suffering. It's a panic situation for any government to handle. I think the government has done a good job. We are part of many WhatsApp group directly in contact with the government, and the kind of initiative, the kind of effort they have taken, they have cut down the bureaucracy. I think it's tremendous. It gives us a lot of hope that how we can tackle this situation. Now coming back to the medical device, the core question, Vivekji, that you have asked. how India can become a major player in medical device. So I'd like to start in a very simple way. Where is the market, right? We all are businessmen. We all have investors. An investor is going to put in money. Where is a large market, right? What the government, I should start with the government. The government should focus on creating a large market. You have mentioned the total market is $10-11 billion, right? And medical device is a very, very large product group. You might have more than 3,000, 4,000 products in that $11 billion. When you divide it, it's very small markets that is there in India. And to think of, compared to China, it is a $90 billion market. Compared to US, it's a $148 billion market, right? No wonders, a lot of companies are growing in that particular space. Because the market is large, the investors are willing to put money. Today, why SMT has grown to this space? Because the market in India is large. The market in India is almost 700,000 stents. It can afford to have multiple players. It can afford to promote competition, and competition brings quality. As much as we can hate competition, we hate, to have less players, but those competition brings quality. So I think the most important point, we are a 3 trillion economy, right? In the 3 trillion economy, our healthcare expenditure is very, very minimal. I think the first thing that we need to do is to make healthcare expenditure at least 7 to 10%. The developed countries has got 15% of the GDP as healthcare expenditure. That will, right now, if I give you example, the PPE mask, the N95, PPE and N95 mask, why you are able to, make 2 lakh per day? Because there is a market. COVID created a large market today. Overnight, there are a lot of players to manufacture the product because there's a ready market to buy. Similarly, I think what we need to do is to create that market. That's the first thing. Second, while creating the market, what are the things that need to be from the government, from all of us, that need to be focused on? Medical device, all of these products, quality is very, very, very critical, right? If I don't have quality, my products will not be sold, which China is facing right now. SMT, when we focused on our quality, the export growth multiplied over time. In last 7 years, the export growth we have is 60 to 70% year over year. Today, we have almost $60 million in export only. And that's because we focused heavily on quality. So the government has to make sure that the quality standards in India are of very high standard. And how do we measure quality, particularly in the high-end medical devices, is the clinical trial. Sunil Khurana has talked about clinical trial. We did a clinical trial in Europe, which got published in Lancet. We challenged the market leader. And that established SMT as one of the top players in the world in medical device, in particularly coronary stent space. We challenged Abbott, which is the market leader, and the study got published in Lancet. Then after that, nobody is talking about that your product quality is not up to the standard, right? So the focusing on that quality from the regulatory standpoint, standing, investing in the company to improve the quality, sponsoring them to do clinical trial, promoting them to do clinical trial is very critical. For example, in China, right now, most of the implantable medical devices or high-end medical devices, they will need clinical trial in China for you to give approval, randomized clinical trial to give you approval. Why? Because it establishes the quality standard. So unless government starts focusing on creating those quality standards, we'll have probably lot many players, but we can never become a large player in the world market. The third point is medical device is a highly regulated industry. 40 to 50% of the market of the medical device is in US. Some in Japan, some in Europe, and some in China. But largely 40 to 50% is in US. And in US, to enter into US market, it needs lot of regulatory approval, and those regulatory approval is highly costly. For example, for a stent, coronary stent that you talked about US FDA approval, and I would love to talk about it. We are working very closely with the US FDA for the approval. The amount of money that we have to spend to get the US FDA approval is 230 crores. That's the amount of money that we need to invest to get into US FDA approval. Of course, the market is $4 to $5 billion. We can hopefully commercialize it and to get the return. But to generate that 230 crore is very difficult. So government should have some program to help us in this regulatory approval, in quality, and creating the market. If these three things are done, I'm pretty sure the Indian market will become much larger. Total world market, we have $10 billion medical device market. Out of export is around $1.5 billion. And that's why if I look at the Indian medical device, probably $2 billion total. How much we are selling in India and the export market is $2 billion total. But if we can make in India this $11 billion, let's say $40-50 billion, and focus on quality, clinical trial, regulatory approval, we don't need to do anything. The market will grow tremendously. India will become one of the largest players in medical device space. That's my thought.
Thank you, Mr. Sabat, and great thoughts. I think that's good news for all the medical device manufacturers that an Indian company can have a study published in Lancet talking about and challenging one of the leading players. That actually all goes to show the strength of the Indian medical device industry, which is untapped, which is yet to be explored. And of course, quality, randomized clinical trials, and of course, the huge investments which go behind regulatory approvals really need a lot of support from the government as well as from the industry. So taking that forward, I think it's time for me to bring in Mr. Sanjay Jha. Mr. Jha, you've been quite involved in setting up a portal, for selling of medical devices. I'd like to hear from you first, Kurt. What are your thoughts on it? And then I come back with a round of questions after going to Mr. Dogra. So, Mr. Jha, I think it's a unique experience you must have had having a portal focused on medical devices. So what is your experience out there, Stace?
Thanks, Mr. Vivek, for having me. And it was really wonderful to hear the thoughts of such a senior panelists. Well, setting up a portal is just one part of the structure, which is enabling the transaction. Okay. And I would say that's the easiest part. Okay. So currently, we had been heavily engaged with COVID distribution. Okay. We started working on it since January end. Okay. And we partner with majority of the large multinationals, lots of domestic players. So, Mr. Khurana, you might not be aware, but we are your distributor also. Okay.
No, I know that.
Okay. I have seen tremendous change in the last 3 months, last 2.5 months especially. So if I look at our own distribution in January, okay, almost 90% of the products which we used to sell had come from or had some imprint of foreign manufacturing. It might be the products coming straight by the as a private label or multinationals importing, okay, or us importing. And I was looking at our sales last month, which is obviously significantly lower than the previous months, but it's now 90% domestic sale. Okay, so it has completely changed the way our outlook of distribution was. Okay, what the focus should be going forward, and what we see the opportunity. Okay, being from a medical device industry for almost 20 years now, being on the R&D side as well. So one of the other commonality with Mr. Kurana is that I used to work with GE Healthcare in US and did lots of R&D with them. Okay, I have few patents on my name. So I'm an innovation guy. Over time moved to distribution and now in this. Okay, and lately what we have become just slaves of uh, outside India manufacturing. Okay, there was a push needed, and unfortunately or fortunately, this corona has given us such a huge boost, such a big push to all of us in medical device that suddenly people from outside medical devices, for whom the value of healthcare was very, very low, the value of healthcare has just gone up, right? Most of the day, the calls I get are from non-medicals. Okay, they want to know what's happening in medical device industry. So now, so for us, this cannot be a better moment to propel medical device India, domestic India, to very. Okay, I've been talking to Mr. Jiten Sharma lately, and some of you already talked to them. He was talking about setting up Indian manufacturing of at least 200,000 crores in next 3 to 4 years, as from AMTZ plan. That is the way to go, right? We have capability, which we have shown. Okay, see, if you look at preventive part of corona, right? We have been able to produce hand rub, we have been able to produce PPE, we have been able to produce masks. Okay, so on the preventive space, we have done very good job. And although quality is a concern, but I would perhaps put that for time being, availability is more important, right? If you choose between quality and having nothing or having something, I'll say at least have something, right? So I would say that within the last 2-3 months, the amount of ramp up we have done, that shows our capability. Okay, and going forward, okay, I think, and I had been talking to lots of startups lately. Okay, the guys who had been doing some other businesses, but right now they have nothing else to do, so they started focusing on medical devices. And some of the startups which are working on driving certain COVID-related products, and the amount of time they took to get prototyping done is like gives me lots of hope, right? So personally speaking, I would say when it comes to COVID, it had opened at least my mind. It has certainly made healthcare much important thing in everybody's mind, and if we do not take this opportunity up, and all of the senior guys here, ways, then we are missing the boat. Okay, so that will be more my thought, Mr. Vivek.
Thank you, Mr. Jha. I think taking off from your optimism, uh, and we also see, as you're saying, that a lot of people who are not from the industry talking about what's happening in the industry and may like to kind of work on it or work in it. I think it's a good sign, which actually uh, may bring all issues related to problems also if you have mushrooming of a lot of these manufacturers, which will again have to be looked at. But let me now actually bring in Mr. Ritesh Dogra. So what I would do is, for the sake of time, not only ask you to have your opening remarks, but also if you could quickly suggest us that what should be the growth strategy for medical devices industry, especially after the announcement of our Prime Minister's 20 lakh crore economic package and focus on self-reliance and make in India perspective and Atmanirbharta and all that. So if you can combine the two, I think it would be great to move forward. Mr. Dogra.
Sure. Sure, Vivek. Thanks to everybody. I think all of you have put in a good platform and a lot of perspectives for this discussion. And I think it's very unfortunate that for BPL, it took Goldman, and for Ganesh and Sahajanand, it took Morgan Stanley to reach where they are. And the COVID made us realize that, you know, this entire Atmanirbharta has come now. I wish we were Nirbhar earlier, but yeah, I mean, that's the irony of life. It can only be looked in retrospect. So that's one. The second, I think, a very important point which, you know, Ganesh has put forward is, and, you know, going back, another something which Corona has exposed is, you know, when we were looking at this, we didn't have IR thermometers in India. And it's such a sad state that, you know, something which involves an infrared technology and electronics was never made in India. Now, that's again another irony of life. And the third is, it gives, I don't know how many of you feel like that, because, sorry, all of us happen to be from medical equipment technology fraternity. But every day when I read Times of India or on my phone, NDTV or anything, we as a country and as people have begun to celebrate what is called low cost. So everywhere you see India manufactures low cost PPE. IIT Bombay, IIT Kharagpur has developed low cost PPE. Mahindra developed low cost ventilators. And as Ganesh was talking some time back, I wish there was a news item which said India develops better quality ventilators than US. We never see that. And that is all across our society. In, you know, I have nothing against Akshay Kumar or Padman, but everywhere you see, that is where it is. Now, the single fundamental question I keep asking myself, God forbid if anybody in my network had something like this, will I be happy with, let's say, Dr. Subramaniam or Apollo, putting him on a low-cost, made-in-India ventilator? Will I be suspicious of it? Will I be wary of it? Will I look back and say, ki, yeah, BPL hai, Philips hai, GE hai, isme kuch hai, ya ye, you know, this is some low-cost made? Because, you know, I'm okay to spend, I'm okay to get, but, you know, I get scared when somebody, you know, everywhere, every day, every single news item celebrates that low cost. It's extremely scary. And nobody, I wish there was one news item which said India made a better quality ventilator than China and US. India, forget ventilator, India made a better quality IR thermometer than anybody. Even simple as thing, IR thermometer, you know, India makes at 1500. PPE made at rupees 200. Why? I mean, why are we doing this? On one side, government is talking about this entire 20 lakh, and, you know, we are looking at all this 20 lakh and everything. And then suddenly we think that everything which the 20 lakhs gives has to be at low cost. And, you know, in this entire ecosystem and value chain, I don't know how many people have made what, but that is beside the perspective of what we are talking about. So I think that is one irony of life. And the best learnings from there would come from people like BPL, Sahajanand, or Hindustan Syringe, or Opto, or Trivitron, because there are only a handful of companies in India. And, you know, these handful of companies have taken the leap of faith to do something and to prove that they can do a better quality. Now, the best case scenario of how that 20 lakh can be utilized is there at home, resting with these companies. Say, for example, how did, you know, Sunil spend on, you know, using that funding, or how did Ganesh think about it? How did they go about it? And surprisingly, both of them are here. And, you know, I think two things will not help. One is the land bank as SOPs. It is not going to help at all. Land is the easiest thing to get. Delivering on it is the most difficult thing to get. And Apollo IMCL, you know, Indraprasth Apollo is a classic example. You know, you get the land, but then what does it take to deliver on that land? It's not a simple exercise. Similarly, you know, you can have increasing import duties and everything, but like Sunil mentioned sometime, where are the export incentives? Where did they go? I mean, today, if you look at anything, they talk about these two things. These two things I don't think are going to help. So again, let's stop being cynical and look at, okay, hence what could help? So what could help is today everybody understands and you know how to do it. And G Healthcare is one classic example. And you know, I think 10 years back, they started saying this in country for world. I remember rightly, they called it ICFW. And this entire ICFW focus was make in India for the world. And that is where their entire value segment was born, where they talk about value cities, value, X-rays, which were at low cost, but without any compromise on quality. That quality itself took 2 to 3 years. And that itself took a lot of time to deliver on that quality. Today, they talk about value MRI. Now, value MRI has a refurbished market. They call it Tesla. Now, they call it, I don't remember, but that is a value MRI. Now, that value MRI has a refurbished magnet, but that refurbished magnet to develop took a lot of time. And that is where there's a lot to be done to get there. And what takes to get there is not low cost, not land banks, not import duties. It is about talking about in-country forward, talking about giving companies that bandwidth to take their R&D time, and giving incentives to, let's say, Dr. Subramaniam or hospitals to install that machines if they don't have appetite, and if medical equipment companies think that there is a certain manufacturing cost and quality cost involved, then the delta gap which is there between the hospital and medical equipment, I think if the government just focused on filling that gap, that bridge funding, that is enough to make the medical devices industry jump to the next level. The last and final point, I think when you were talking about the MRI and magnet, I told you, and the SOPs, there is also a certain sense of collaboration. Let's say Ganesh spoke about stent, Sunil spoke about, patient monitoring devices. There are others who are doing different, let's say syringes or anything. There is a value ecosystem which is in India. It requires collaboration and, delivering it. Now, for example, let me take a very different example. Let's say Stryker. Stryker has their knee implants, triathlon and all those knees which we hear about. And I was surprised to know that these are 3D implants and they are manufactured at Stryker Farm in US. And, of course, if it was an interactive session, I would have posed this question to even the audience, but very few people know that the machines they are manufactured on are GE Arcam machines. GE Arcam machines at Stryker Farm manufacturing equipment, which is knee implant. I mean, how better can you get in terms of those collaborations? Today, you have manufacturing units enough. I mean, there is, for example, there's Kalyani Technoforge. There are a lot of manufacturing units. Can you use the excess production capacity, giving the right proprietary technology to make the right equipment, to do bridge funding and deliver to hospitals? You can. So I think somewhere the priorities certainly are getting misplaced. And like I say, the government is playing referee at some misplaced priorities, which might not give the desired results is my fear. The irony is all these thinking, all knowledge and all experience resides within a country with players who we have here. But have they heard us right? I think there is a certain gap. And that is where I'll leave. The numbers are all, whether we jump to 50 million, 60 million, 100 billion, every number is a right number giving the population and export appetite. But are these priorities getting misplaced? I think somewhere, yes. And with that, Vivek, I'll get back to you.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Dogra. I think point raised on quality and why we are always a price advantage country. Though I might tend to disagree with you as a moderator, because I think back in pharma, if you see, we have maintained and the best quality to the world, not only in drugs, but also in the vaccines at excellent costs. So, generally a perception that a low price product is of a bad quality is something which is more of a myth. And I see Mr. Sabat actually nodding very aggressively on this. So that actually takes me to your question, Mr. Sabat. Considering the fact that, countries all over the world are looking for alternates to China, using various products and raw materials, do you think is the right opportunity? Our last figure which I had was about $378 billion of products being exported out of China last year. So alternates for China, I think we discussed that a bit earlier also. But where do you get at? And also looking at what Mr. Dogra said about the price quality equation. Mr. Sagar.
Thank you, Vivekji. Ritesh, you have made a lot of good points. I must say those points are really good. But as Vivekji has rightly said, low cost and low quality are not synonyms. Okay, and that's the most important point to understand. Second,
Absolutely.
world need low cost healthcare. Today, a lot of European countries are on the brink of bankruptcy, the country getting into trouble, they need low cost. The number of people who are growing older and older, the burden it is creating across the globe, you need low cost. On one hand, US is struggling every day, to afford that healthcare. So low cost is required, but not low quality. Okay, you gave the example of GE Healthcare being a value based product. That is a different name for low cost, right? But not low quality. You also told that stage that not low quality. India, I'll tell you the points Vivekji you have said. Can India, take the position of China? My point is onto that. Yes, India can, but India needs a larger domestic market to do that. You need 10 to 12 players of each product. Today, I'll just give you a couple of examples, right? Let's say AAA. AAA is a device that get implanted in your aorta, lower aorta, descending aorta, because there is an infection, right? There are a lot of patients of AAA, and total number in India is 1,000 implanted. With that number of implant, why? Because it's not reimbursed from the government, and the reimbursed price is very, very low. With that, kind of market, nobody will be willing to get into these markets. And there are so many products. I can give you hundreds of examples. The volume is so low, Indian player will not jump into those markets. There are some other examples I'll give. While the Indian domestic market need to be built up so that it makes Indian player to jump into that bandwagon and take up the market share, there are large number of US medical device players which are struggling, which are listed companies in the New York Stock Exchange. If you look at their profitability, the profitability is absolutely 1% negative. And these are the products which has got no replacement. Still, they're struggling because of the manufacturing cost. If you look at their gross margin, the gross margin is 40%, 50%. Okay, with that gross margin, if you're a technology company, you are not going to survive. And those companies are struggling. While as a stand company in India, we make a 2% gross margin, the same US company will be struggling with a 40% gross margin. By just coming to India, there will be a lot of American companies which will get saved. Their profitability will jump by 15 to 20%. And we have the engineer and we have the knowledge base. We don't have the ecosystem. We still don't have the ecosystem for the medical device. And you talked about, Ritesh, you talked about high quality. Let me just put another point to you. In medical device, there's two segments, which are very low cost product, small products like the consumables, the hospital supplies, the bandages and the consumables, where you don't need a lot of technical knowledge, but there are high-end products. Those high-end products, unless there is an ecosystem, there are people who understand that technology and figure out what is the problem with this technology. We cannot talk about innovation. We cannot talk about bettering the quality better than US or China or Europe or Japan, where they are manufacturing these devices for last 20 years. Unless you build that ecosystem and you know how can I bring that innovation to become better, we cannot become better. So first of all, we have to build that ecosystem to come to the same quality level and go up next. I always talk about Germany is one of the best engineering country in the world. Do you know in World War One, where this word coined, made in UK, made in where this word word that was used, made in US, where it got coined in World War One. When UK was the largest market, Germany wanted to sell their product in UK. And UK, to differentiate, because they are not able to sell their product, Germany was lowest cost product. To differentiate, UK started writing made in UK. That is the first time they used. Germany at that point of time were known as a low cost product, low cost country. Similar with Japan. Japan was known as a low cost country in US. Today, look at it. It's a journey. It's a journey where you go from nowhere to match them and to better them. I'm pretty sure US will better, India will better them. India has all the capability to better them. Okay, it's just we have to give stepwise. First, build a market so that Indian industry come, the ecosystem built. There are a lot of brilliant engineers. Now they will say, okay, why don't you bring something innovative? To bring something innovative from the very first day is very difficult without experience.
Thank you, Mr. Sawat, and I think with a lot of encouragement there and a lot of belief in the Indian ecosystem and the capabilities of the Indian medical devices industry, I think we poise forward. And at this time, I am obliged to share my screen and also talk about our sponsor. So we thank Indraprasth Apollo Hospitals for sponsoring this webinar. So thank you very much, Apollo Hospitals. I'd also like to inform everyone that the hosts of this webinar are PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Voice of Healthcare. So with that, I go to my next question for Dr. Subramanian. Dr. Subramanian, I would like that very, very efficient healthcare delivery country. We have been getting patients from all over the world. Again, being cost effective, Mr. Dogra, for your reference, but we still do attract a lot of patients internationally, even from Europe and America. So where do you think we lacked, Dr. Subramanian, when it came to tackling COVID? With the 70% of the healthcare delivery being given, if not more, to the masses. But where do you think we had to do a lot more to be prepared for COVID-19 in the private healthcare delivery system?
Yeah, I think firstly, many of the dimensions have been so beautifully addressed by our previous speakers. Coming to the specific question of how prepared we were to face this sudden COVID situation as private healthcare industry. See, we all know that globally, this was one of the most extraordinary situations, something totally unprecedented, with no understanding of how this virus or the disease is going to evolve, nor understanding what is it that we require to either treat or diagnose this condition. One of the most important parameters we all realized was this was not just about providing healthcare. Preventing transmission meant changing a lot of social habits, beginning with the idea of regular hand sanitization or hand washing, to the question of even the normal things like cough etiquettes. Thirdly, the idea of maintaining cleanliness And lastly, the idea of safe distancing. All these formed a significant dimension in terms of preventing transmission of the disease, number one. Secondly, the requirements that we had in terms of the personal protective equipment and even small things like gloves and masks and goggles, etc., things which the Indian industry has always been so quick to produce whenever the need arose, we probably could not have anticipated the requirement, number one. Secondly, also because it was a global event which suddenly closed a lot of the existing markets for us. So the situation on the one hand might have exposed our limitations, but at the same time also indicated that we are resilient enough to bounce back. Right, going from no PPEs to 2 lakh PPEs a day, from no N95s to going to this thing, it's a clear indication that the industry is quite resilient, number one, and are capable of taking a challenge on. Secondly, coming to how is it that we can avoid this happening for future? You know, the question of the first would have to be that we need to have a wider platform to plan our healthcare. Very often we respond to the requirements with the least of investment possible. You know, I think like Ganeshji earlier brought out, you know, if we could have a larger proportion of our GDP invested in healthcare, it is going to be the cost worth the while. Because if you reduce a lot of illness, you automatically have a much better and a healthy workforce to begin with. Second thing that came up was we need to have joint plans. I think if the planning for equipment manufacturing or devices or reagents or any of the other manufacturers that we look at, if there was a predetermined plan of government and private hospitals, the IITs, the entrepreneurs, the manufacturers, all coming together with people who have engaged in basic research. So we can actually decide what needs to be planned and what can be done, rather than deciding to say, okay, I need stents, I'm going to go into stents, or I need sutures, I go to sutures. And again, the system between cost and value needs to be differentiated. When we first introduced a robotic surgery in this part of the world about 10 years ago, there was a lot of concern about whether the extra cost in these surgeries is worth the investment. If you look at it from a different dimension, if there were less complications, less pain, and if the patient was going to go back into the office a week or two ahead of when he would have otherwise gone, it was 2 weeks of working time for the individual. So both in terms of his business and in terms of his own revenue from his business, would have offset the increased cost probably at least 10-fold, if not more. So sometimes we look at value in a different format. Similarly, somebody recovering so quickly without pain is value in itself. So I think coming together is the other thing which we have learned from here. If you see the COVID, the government, the private, the ICMR, the various research bodies, academics, coming together with all other services is what achieved what we could achieve today. Secondly, we need to look at the investment in research. All of us know that till about the 50s and 60s, UK was one of the top countries in investment into research and did extremely well. Yet between the 60s and the 70s, when their investment in research went down, even smaller countries like Belgium or Holland very quickly took over them. So there has to be a planned investment into research, making the research atmosphere more clear. Thirdly, it might be useful to have a comprehensive listing of the various equipment, the consumables, reagents, diagnostics, etc., well in advance to see who are the people who might look at flexibly getting into these. You know, when we were talking about the role of 3D printing of joints, if these were to be done on a large scale, they would certainly be a lower cost. But the value of a 3D printing would mainly come in the areas where there needs to be a customization. The minute you need a customization, you can't mass produce these things. Similarly, when you look at the role of prevention, to me, prevention is going to be the most important single thing in the long term. If you can stop people, if you can make people control their diabetes better, if they can recognize their potential for heart disease earlier, if they treat their blood pressures adequately enough, if they stop their kidneys from getting damaged and get into early dialysis or transplant early enough, then obviously we are going to work very well on these. So I think a focus on preventive diagnostics, I think, is a huge role that we need to play. Especially when you look at things like the wearables, the Internet of Things. All these are areas, particularly with the AI helping us to create much bigger and much quicker understanding of data. I think comprehensively the industry coming together along with the innovators and the hospitals. If hospitals like mine were to partner with people who are manufacturing a large gamut of products, I'm sure that sooner or later, we will reach that point of saying it's not only the value, we are going to produce quality, which is comparable, which will be competitively acceptable, so that we will move more into an export market as well, and not just satisfy our own requirements. So I think there's a tremendous potential in all of this for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Subramanian. I think I really love the way you put across the specific point on, actually having a more broad-based platform for, planning and discussing and the entire health ecosystem, which can have all the stakeholders, which could be a definite learning from the current pandemic. And of course, very other important points on investments in research, listing of equipments, which are really required, preventive diagnostics. So I think very valid points there, and I'm sure Mr. Sabar, Mr. Rana,
Sunday ko lockdown hoga, sir.
Dogra, they have a lot of things to take home. Mr. Multani, you want to add something, please?
Yeah, thank you, Vivek. I would just like to say one thing, that what are we doing in the PhD chambers? You see, we understand that there was a time of BCAC before Christ and after Christ. Now, this is in today's date, we have a golden opportunity. This is before China virus and after China virus. We have got all the people who are here today. We are all eminent people from our respective fields. And now it is very, very, we have also to understand that the leader whom we have, the Prime Minister, is very clear that this is a golden opportunity and we cannot miss the bus. Now, what basically I'm trying to say is that we have in our chamber, in PhD chamber, we have made up, we have our economic cell where we have prepared that what all we are importing from China, how can we substitute and make it in India? We are getting inputs from all our members. Okay, what are the impediments? How we can avoid imports from China and manufacture in India? Now, each one of you, I will request each one of you that you being leaders of your segment, whatever you would like the chamber to do. We've had this sort of a webinar today. If you want any person from central government to be there, we can have those. You give us the problem where we can, I think the topmost urologist, who's the chairman of our health committee, Dr. Subramanian. There is no keeping us back. The only thing which is keeping from red tapeism from red tapeism to red carpet has to be laid out the world. I will just each one of you, whatever you feel is proper, in your segment, whatever things you want to, which will take us forward and grab this golden opportunity. Please give the problem, suggested solution. We should have these sort of webinars more often where you let us know who's the crucial man who can, solve that problem. We will invite him into the webinar and we can take this forward. So that's all I had to say. Thank you very much. And absolutely outstanding things are happening under leadership and under our chairman, Dr. Subramaniam. And it's been a pleasure to hear each and every one of you. Thank you.
Right, sir. Thank you so much for those remarks, and definitely also offering the platform of PhD. And we would also like to invite the members of Voice of Healthcare, as also all the participants, attendees here, who may have certain ideas, who are from the industry, who can actually give us their thoughts as to what can help India move into that #1 position, as I started my remarks with, like being the pharmacy of the world. So with that, I move to the next question to Mr. Khurana. And before I started with you in terms of my questions, I end with you with my question, so that we can give a chance to the participants who've been writing questions in the chat to also get answered by the panelists. My last question to you is, how has the global medical devices market been typically segmented vis-a-vis the COVID-19 outbreak?
Yeah, thanks, Vivek. See, if you look at the medical devices, it's a very, very highly fragmented, overall. I mean, we can even say a syringe pump or suture is also a medical device. That you have implants are also a medical device. And then you go for a cyclotron or PET CTs and MRIs and CT scanners are also medical devices. So it's a very wide range. So medical devices, and another thing which we need to really understand is that it is not truly at this point in time that all medical device companies have a great role to play. It's a very different segmentation which is right now happening. If you look at the COVID side, the demand is surging primarily toward the toward the products like oxygen generators, laryngoscopes, BiPAPs, patient monitors, CT, which can be very effectively used for the high resolution CT, chest, or DRs, a pulse oximeter. These are the products which are all basically in the respiratory area. Now, MRIs are those kind of products which take a lot of time for installation. And right now, overall patients globally are not going in the same pace the way they were going earlier. Those products probably are a little bit at the muted growth at this point in time. Does not mean that it's not going to come back. I mean, it's going to come back probably after 1 or 2 quarters. So that's the way I look at in terms of the medical devices. If you also look at in Indian scenarios, government and CSR, where there is no return on investment issue, they are buying. They are just buying and distributing wherever the needies are. But if you look at the private hospitals, where clearly a return of investment is very key. And most hospitals today are doing about 20-25% of the total patients they are visiting them. So that's the area, because we know elective surgeries or joint replacements or ophthalmic or dental, all that is getting postponed. So this is where the challenge is. And look at the medical device companies. Our growth, our sustenance is also dependent how good the medical delivery side does. If hospital does well, we will do well. So we are very confident that this is going to just come back. I mean, look at what sometime back Dr. Subramaniam said, that in terms of patient which is coming from overseas as a medical tourism. Now there is no medical tourism. Nobody is traveling here. And that was a pretty big segment which was helping a lot to our corporate hospitals. And they were cross-subsidizing, because today also, we may still feel that costs are quite high in India in terms of procedures. We think that as an Indian, but if you put benchmark across the globe, we are probably 1/5 or 1/6 of the cost on the healthcare delivery side. And that was happening a lot. They were trying to support cross-subsidy from there. So this is where the customer segmentation is happening. What I want to clearly say here is that, investors and team, which is a management team at hospitals or at the medical devices side, need to understand that there are so many variables at this point in time. There's a lot of uncontrolled variable at this time. And hence, whether it is the margins, whether it is the raw material availability, cost, all that is not in our control. What is in our control at this point in time is a fixed cost. We all need to really learn to understand that how can we manage the fixed cost nicely. I'm not trying to say that, we completely cut it, because for sure there is going to be a big surge which is going to be there in probably 1 or 2 quarters. And in this period, most companies, how they have behaved is that they have gone for a lot of from face-to-face training to an e-learning side. I think the amount of learning has been imparted everywhere, even to doctors, even to technicians, even to our own team member, is tremendous. That has been a new way of the new way we have started doing business or connecting people. Similarly, if you look at the CMEs, face-to-face CMEs have gone, all digital webinars, or the future is for telemedicine. I mean, I can clearly feel that teleradiology was a one area, but telemedicine is going to be the answer to most people. They don't want to go for small things. And tertiary hospitals like Apollo's and all, a lot of normal patients were coming even with a cough, cold, or fever and things like that. You will see that may not be now happening more. You will have a more serious patients going to tertiary hospitals, and next door doctors and physicians will probably emerge to help, other kind of. So also as a on efficiencies, a lot of new efficiencies we need to do. We have to manage on the cash flow side. When working capital is a challenge area for all of us, and that is where we need to bring the better efficiencies, better understanding. Cash to inventory cycle is another area where we all have to work very, very well. And I must say that each company must look at whether hospital or companies at least for 9 to 12 months of liquidity. Unless we have that, and government must work there. Government must work to support small companies. At least a 3 to 4 months of their revenue of the annual should be given as a interest-free loan, because that's very important that you give them, and that will finally come back in a big time, because that empathy has to be there from government to the small establishments. And these are the points which basically have my thoughts. And more investment I expect will come from private investors. I also feel like auto guys have jumped into a lot of dinners. They are going to also jump into the medical devices. I mean, this is a new area which I think diversification will happen from these large organizations. On the whole, I want to say that medical device, which was not a very vibrant like pharma, medical device is going to see a great time in years to come. And that is that has been understood by everybody. And in India, if you look at the benchmarking, because we don't still have those clear SOPs that how many ventilators should be there in the hospital, per ICU bed, do you need 1 or you need half or you need 2? I mean, those are the SOPs which needs to be written. And there's a long way, because as just now I heard that we are talking of now 2.9 million beds, which is multiple times. Medical devices in India are going to really do very well, and good time is there ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Khurana, for that note of optimism. And of course, I think, as Dr. Subramanian said, there is an opportunity again for medical device companies to look at tie-ups and working together with chains of hospitals, which also throws up another opportunity for both the sub parts of the healthcare sector. And of course, a very interesting aspect which you have brought out is, how can we look at 3 to 4 months of working capital being financed by the government, of the healthcare sector delivery as well as other related sectors.
That's very key.
Which is relatively interesting, because I think somewhere down the line we need to also make a point to the government that, look, this is the sector which has really sustained the healthcare delivery system and has been supporting it through thick and thin, and especially during the COVID-19 times. And I think somebody also talked about increasing the overall health budget. At PhD, we have been, harping and quite aggressively talking about at least 5% of the GDP to go into the healthcare system, which I'm sure the government will begin to realize considering the experience of the COVID-19.
Yeah, I just want to just say one more point of Dr. Subramanian, which he said. His view was that, research atmosphere in India is not there. And this I fully agree. I mean, I was with the GE Healthcare for 28, 29 years, and I have used to go all over the world. In South Korea, I have seen a small country. They used to publish about 100 plus papers in RSNA, Radiology Society of North America, a small community. And in India, we are always, fighting because a lot of patients, everybody is so busy doing, that basic service delivery, healthcare service delivery. We don't have time. We don't have a dedicated team to do the R&D job. So, this is one area which I 100% agree with Dr. Subramaniam, that government has to focus a lot to build the DNA of R&D. And the moment you have a better DNA of R&D, automatically your manufacturing will also kickstart. So that's very, very valid.
So thank you very much. And I think that brings me to two pertinent questions which are there in the chat. And before that, I am again obliged to share with you that this particular webinar is brought to you by VOH, Voice of Healthcare, and PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And we would once again like to thank our sponsor, Indraprastha Apollo Hospitals, for making this possible. Thank you very much. And that takes me to one of the questions related by Abhinav in the chat. And he says, exports is restricted to diagnostics. We have enough capacity in biochemistry reagents. Then why is the exports restricted? So would Mr. Dogra like to take this question? You'll have to unmute yourself, please.
Sorry, in terms of the exports where we are talking, I agree and I understand the fact about the biochemistry reagent, but in terms of restrictions, let's say today, biochemistry, whether we talk about TransAsia or some other companies which are manufacturing here, there is a certain amount of chain which needs to be maintained in biochemistry, which I think is a concern today in terms of export. So the reagent quality and effectiveness become a concern once you are transporting it. However, for others, in terms of diagnostic, it is much simpler to do that. So once we have that entire process and value chain created, is something when it will pick up. So I don't think it is looked at as a side or as an orphan. It is just that in terms of the supply chain, there's some bit of streamlining to do there.
Okay. Also throw that question to Mr. Jha. Would you like to put in your perspective on that? Please unmute yourself.
I think some of the restrictions which we have been put in right now is more on the precautionary side. And we already started seeing processes coming in so that restrictions have been taken out. When, for example, now you can get special approvals for N95s and masks. I'm assuming that this is related to COVID product. So you can get approvals and the export has started from slowly getting on. So I'm, and among my some discussions with government officials, looks like another week or two, things will get much more lighter once the supply chain also becomes better. So it's a very short term.
Okay. My next question is which I'd like, in case Mr. Khurana can make an attempt to it, and in case Mr. Sabat would also like to answer that. So it says, do we think our regulatory is able to regulate a quality with cost-effective medical device in Indian market? As past cases were there, where the low quality of steel was used, not even medical grade, for preparation of orthopedic implants to make low cost for competitive market. So would you like to react to that, Mr. Khurana?
Yeah, so I think that since the overall manufacturing in India was not really happening a lot, and there is no very defined regulatory policies even today. We are building a lot of new regulatory frameworks. BIS is trying to work. We are trying to also learn from how the CE and FDA have put various quality parameters. So I think it's a journey which we have to take together as a manufacturers, as a regulatory total body. Because if you look at the regulatory framework in India has not been that great. Anybody can just bring anything from outside, and those were not there. Now from next year, March onwards, there is going to be a MDR, medical devices regulation is kicking in. So I think from there on, things will definitely change. And it has to be a journey which should be embarked. We can't say that, where we are and we should not really feel bad about it. But my thinking is that if we are all together, this all will be corrected. One thing we have to keep in mind that we are not only building product at a low cost mindset, only for a specific territory. We should always build a product that this should stand on a quality parameters good when it goes to any outside country and they accept this, as a best product. With that mindset, I don't think there'll be a problem, but we have to work together.
So Sabat, your take on this particular question?
No, I agree. I think our regulatory system is right now evolving. So it's not something where we expect it to be. Right? I read some days back the Prime Minister calling for a complete overhaul for the regulatory system. Niti Aayog is working extensively onto it. There are a lot of papers that have come out. But I think one of the most critical point, which is very different from pharma, one of the most critical point that we need to understand while formulating medical device, there are a lot of material science, like the point that have been raised, the steel tube, right? The lot of material science that goes behind it. If I look at a US FDA regulatory authority, there will be a panel of top scientists with PhD who are part of the panel. There will be a top healthcare professional, some cardiologist if it is a cardiology product, some gynecologist if it is a gynecology product. Those people are involved not only formulating the policy, but also through the approval process. And some of the testing lab are top notch. Right now in India, we don't have many testing lab to certify that this stainless steel tube is of medical grade. You need testing facilities. And we are dependent, for these facilities, we are dependent on Europe or US or Canada. And those testing facilities are very, very costly. Something, a preclinical trial, an animal trial, that we can do it for 7-8 lakhs in Suchitra will cost around 20 CR, in US. So that's the cost difference, that the burden that we come across. So if not only formulating the policies, how do we get the right person? With all due respect, our bureaucrats, the IS officials, they are not domain experts. So most of the time we see people, IS officers heading it, discussing about it, but we need domain expert to discuss about it, to understand it. You cannot just, by taking 15 days training, you cannot become an expert onto it. You need a PhD, some kind of expertise that you have done. You understand the intricacy and approve. And remember, these are a highly innovative product. So if you have a rule book that says this will be approved, then the innovation will just kill it, right? So a subject matter expert in our regulatory system is highly required. Our customers, like the healthcare professionals, are highly required. I think it should be made a very wholesome system. Like Sunil Khurana ji has said, in India, the regulatory system, if you say US FDA, we are absolutely saying that it will be high quality. The objective should be, if it is DCGI approval, then the people across the world should believe that it is of high quality. If you are saying CE approval, the people are believing that it is of certain quality. How do we get into that certain mindset? How do we create the infrastructure? That is very critical. We are not there right now.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think it's been a great session, and we've heard one of the most important brains talking to us today, in these COVID times on a critical issue as that of medical devices. And it's been a very, very interesting discussion. And if I look at my notebook, it's full with about 3 or 4 pages of inputs which we have heard. And we've had some very interesting questions from the attendees as well. And I'd like to, once again, at the end of my webinar, thank Voice of Healthcare and PhD Chamber, who are the co-organizers of this webinar, as well as Apollo Hospitals, who have sponsored this. Thank you very much for your support. And my hearty thanks to Mr. Khurana, Mr. Ritesh Dogra, Mr. Ganesh Sabat, Mr. Sanjay Jha, Dr. N. Subramanian, for coming on live, which was also on Facebook, for this wonderful discussion, and for all your time which you have given to all of us here to listen to your processes. We look forward to continue interacting with each other on many such platforms. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Vivek.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Vivek.
so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.